Hey guys, how's it going? This is Natinator, and welcome back to the first part of the last installment of the Tales of the City series. I am still loving the writing and plots to these, and I really hope you guys still are too. This one is titled Burnt Offerings. Now as always, turn out the lights, get comfortable, and let the story begin. It's last call. Hey, liking that poem, you know? Hurry up please, it's time. Sorry, I've had a lot to drink. We all have, and I for one don't really feel safe going home after everything we've heard tonight. But all those stories can't be true. Even if you believe in that kind of thing, there can't be one city with so many secrets. Maybe it's not the city that's really the problem. Listen closely. What do you hear? My pounding head? The bartender throwing us out? My boyfriend leaving impatient text messages wondering where I am? Underneath all of that, I mean, do you hear it? The ocean. But that's miles away. Doesn't matter. We've got the ocean on one side, the bay on the other, and the straits connecting them. We're surrounded by the sea. You can't get away. So what? Maybe the ocean is the reason so many strange things happen here. Maybe there's something in the water. Here, we have a little more time before this place is really closed. Let me tell you about it. My mother told me he went off to become a frogman. The stringer stopped writing, certain that she had misheard the old woman. They sat in a small, pretty house, just a few blocks from the ruins. A house that smelled persistently of cat, despite no cat being evident. The old woman, her name was Mary Wayland. She was in her 60s, but looked much, much older. Had a voice only slightly more pronounced than silence, and the stringer could never be completely sure that what she had written down was anything close to what the old woman had actually said. A frogman? The stringer asked. That's what they used to call a deep-sea diver in the old days, on account of the flippers and the wetsuit and the goggles. She mimed goggles over her eyes. He always said that's what he'd wanted to be when he grew up. So when he ran off, that's what Mother told me he was doing. The stringer nodded and continued writing without comment. The conversation was going on 45 minutes, and the frogman thing was the most coherent comment she'd gotten so far. She checked the time and found that the light was waning outside. She would have to hurry if she wanted to shoot the ruins today. She skipped to her last question. I understand that he was an artist, but no one ever exhibited his work. That's right, Mary said. In fact, here. The old woman stood. She was not a little old woman, despite her tiny voice. She was tall and thick-limbed. She reminded the stringer of a huge bird, a crane or a stork. The old woman brought out a flat package, a little over a foot on each side, wrapped in brown paper. You mentioned on the phone, and I thought your magazine might like to use this in the article. It's a charcoal sketch he did. Go ahead and keep it. I've got plenty more just like it. Hundreds, maybe. Mother kept them all after he left. The stringer accepted the package, feeling as if she were receiving an unwanted Christmas gift from a relative she barely knew. She left with the package under her arm and her camera around her neck, glad to be free of that clinging cat odor. 40+ minutes of conversation had yielded less than a page of notes. But with the sun at just the right angle on the horizon, it wasn't too late to get some good shots of the ruins. The day needn't be completely wasted. The smell of the salt breeze coming in from the beach stung her nostrils. The stringer had never particularly liked the ocean. She'd rather have lived anywhere but a coastal city. But the city was where the work was. She'd had a regular position as a staff photographer at a decent magazine for a while now. But now she was back to being a stringer, living off of freelance work and making it by job to job. The assignment about the ruins had been a lucky break, but breaks were fewer and further between all the time. She crested the hill and started hiking down the trail toward her destination. The beach that served as the fringe to the city's westernmost side terminated on the north in a series of rocky pools, particularly hazardous to anyone traversing the coast, by land or by sea. But the spectacular views of the waves crashing against the shore had always encouraged developers to build on the bluffs overlooking the area, which is why, 100 years ago, the old mayor built his theatre palace here. People in the city would come all the way out to the beach complex for circus acts and dancing shows and the indoor pool and whatever else the wizards who owned the place cooked up. They'd even had a museum of ancient Egyptian artifacts. But in the 50s, it fell on hard times, and the family sold it to an outsider, George Wayland, who closed it 10 years later and then skipped town. No sooner was he gone than the whole thing burnt to the ground. Wayland himself disappeared, apparently never disembarking from the ship that carried him away from the city. He left behind a wife, a daughter, now an old woman who lived just a few blocks away in her cat-smelling house, and a legacy of unanswered questions. And the place where the pool and circus and the museum once was sat untouched for decades, slowly falling apart, filling in with water and silt and wild plants, until it resembled an ancient ruin. And that was what people called it, the ruins. It was never fully torn down. Folks decided they liked the look of it. The crumbling stone walls and enormous, water-filled pits alongside the beach and the coastline looked more like the remains of a Roman village than anything a turn-of-the-century showman built. The city decided they were beautiful, although, the stringer reflected, as she set her tripod on a hill, to her, the place had always looked creepy as hell. Even when she and Randy played down here as kids, she'd never liked it. But she couldn't afford to only take the jobs she liked. It was 50 years since the fire, and since George Wayland disappeared, and his legend had only grown. So the magazine editors decided to run a big piece, George Wayland, Man and Myth. It didn't matter that there was nothing new to write about it, or that the stringer's photos would be just like any others that anyone had taken in 5 decades. People liked the mystery, and the mystery would sell magazines, which meant the stringer could sell photos. She spent an hour shooting. She caught the ruins at sunset, and the ruins at twilight, and even the ruins at night, when it was really too dark to still be shooting. But she kept shooting anyway. By the time she put her camera away, the only light beside the moon came from the hotel on the cliffs to the south. It was just enough light to see Seal Rock by, although the stringer decided that at this time of night, it didn't really look like a rock at all. It looked like some giant whale just offshore was sticking its head up to get a good look at the city. A whale or something else. She went home. There was a note on the door. Sam had stopped by. She'd forgotten they had plans. That explained the flashing voicemail indicator on her phone as well. She ignored both, going inside and uploading the new photos. She missed the days of her old film camera. Digital just wasn't the same, but it was cheaper and faster. Another compromise she'd made with the world. She studied the twilight photos most closely, scanning every square inch of the image. Nothing unusual was there, but she kept looking anyway. After 2 hours, she gave up. Another wasted day. She flopped onto the couch, picking up the magazine off of the table. She turned to the most well-worn page, and there was a smiling picture of George Wayland, and the headline, George Wayland, Man or Myth. The magazine had gone to stands 2 weeks ago. She'd turned in the photos for it a week before that. The money from it had already been spent. She should have been chasing other leads, should have been getting after editors for more assignments, should have been paying her bills, but instead, she kept going back to the ruins day after day, taking more worthless photos. Hitting up the old woman had been a desperation move, and she'd felt bad about lying and saying she was there on assignment. The old bat was so senile, she didn't even remember reading the finished article when it came out. But it was the only lead she'd had. Now, it was a dud too. She should give up on it. But she couldn't. There was something about the ruins only she knew. Something she couldn't let go of. Thinking about the old woman reminded her of the sketch. She'd left it by the door, still wrapped in brown paper. She retrieved it. When the package was open, she flinched. It was, as promised, a charcoal sketch. It depicted a mirror-flat expanse of ocean, disturbed by an anomalous sea creature breaching the surface, foam spraying from its jaws, and water streaming down its huge body. It was impossible to tell what the animal was actually supposed to be, but it made her think of some kind of dragon, bristling with flippers and fins. It was impossibly ugly. A few human swimmers were added for scale. They were tiny next to the monster. So small, they were practically stick figures. The stringer frowned. Why the hell would Mary Wayland give her this? Then she chided herself. The old bird was nuts. What did she expect? And what had she said? That her father had done hundreds like this. She suddenly wished she'd had it before the story went to print. The editor probably would have loved it. It would have gone great with that one graph toward the end. How did it go? She picked the magazine up and read. Urban legend persists that Wayland himself set the fire that destroyed the pool complex, not as an insurance scam, but to destroy the evidence of the secret ritual murders he supposedly committed there. No serious historical evidence suggests any truth to these rumors, but local kids still sneak down to the ruins late at night, in hopes of hearing the ghostly screams of those said to have died there. The stringer snorted. All bullshit, of course. But people in this city loved their ghost stories. Randy had too. She went back to the sketch. Something about it was bothering her. On a hunch, she opened the back of the frame and removed the delicate paper. In the lower right-hand corner, something was written. She thought at first it was Wayland's name or initials, but now she saw it was a word she didn't recognize. The closest she could decipher it was Espedo Chelone. Curious, she went to the computer to look it up. Espedo Chelone is a fabled sea monster, variously described as a large whale or vast sea turtle. It was supposedly so large as to be mistaken for an island, its great shell appearing like a rocky outcropping. In some traditions, Espedo Chelone is believed to be the Bible's great fish that swallowed the prophet Jonah. Other myth cycles persist that it was an avatar of the devil.